Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, episode number 42. It doesn't matter when you start. It doesn't matter where you start. All that matters is that we start. Simon Sinek.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft. It's the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast, showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast. I am your ever humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie's going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. And today's show is also sponsored by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. If you want access to filmmaking documentaries, feature films about filmmaking, interviews with some of the top screenwriters and filmmakers in Hollywood, as well as educational online courses all in one place, IFH TV is for you. Just head over to indiefilmhustle.tv. Now, you guys know on the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast that we really is kind of a no BS zone. Well, today we're literally doing that with our guest company called No BullScript. Now, today's guest is Danny Manus. Now, Danny is a Hollywood development executive and has been working in the business for many, many years, working with huge companies, and has taken over 3,000 pitches and is now focusing his life on helping screenwriters pitch and be able to get their projects seen by executives, by the studio system. And he's coming at it from a very unique perspective because he was on the other side of that desk for many, many years. So his experience is pretty priceless. That's why I wanted to have him on the show. And today in this episode, we really go deep into the weeds on what executives want, how to pitch properly, the do's, the don'ts, and so on. And Danny's been able to parlay his career as a development executive in Hollywood to become an in-demand script consultant and the founder of No BullScript Consulting. So he is definitely someone you guys should be listening to. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Danny Manus. I'd like to welcome to the show Danny Manus. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So before we get into it, I want to know how you got into the business.
You know, it was kind of a boring story, but I'll make it fun.
Okay.
I interned for a semester. I went to Ithaca College in New York. They had a semester in LA program, which is half of the reason I went there. And so I interned at Columbia TriStar in TV development and at Fox in feature casting. And I loved it. I loved everything about LA. I loved everything about the business. I was studying screenwriting. I came out here to write just after graduation. I had 2 big studio internships under my belt. I thought, I'll get a job, no problem. And I stupidly, which I kick myself for, one of the many mistakes I've made, I didn't go into like the agency trainee program or something like that, right, which I feel like I probably should have. And I tell people to do if they're moving out here young and hungry. But, I looked for a assistant job. And I, off the UTA job list when that used to be a thing, that you could really use. And I got a job as the assistant at Sandstorm Films. They had a first look deal with Sony Screen Gems. They had just had a #1 movie with them with The Forsaken, which was both their and Screen Gems' first #1 movie. So they were very happy with them. Mm-hmm. And I was their assistant for about a year, and I was an awful assistant. But, you know, it was just like everybody else at that time in the early 2000s. You know, you interned, you were an assistant, you did your job, and if you were good at your job, you got promoted. And if you weren't good at your job, you floated around as an assistant for a little longer. Thankfully, I was useless as an assistant, but I gave great notes. And so they kept me. I had good ideas and I gave great notes. And so they promoted me and we found a new assistant to help. But it was, you know, it was a small production company. I had, it was three heads, one person who was above me, and me. And then when we brought in the assistant, it was one more. But we did a lot of movies. We did, I think, in the 3 years I was there, we did 7 films.
That's a lot.
Which is a lot. And most of them for Screen Gems. We did The Covenant, which was a #1 movie.
Yeah.
We did the remake of Prom Night, which was a #1 movie. Yeah. And we did a lot of movies that were not #1 movies back when you could make like straight to DVD movies and still make a lot of money.
Right.
So we did a lot of those too. And and I just I love development. I really like that world. I came out to write like most development executives. And J.S. Cardone, who was our principal, who's a writer-director, he's done 30, 40 films. He took me under his wing along with a couple of other writers that we were managing. Mm-hmm. That we worked with a lot. And so we kind of called ourselves their managers. We'd put them on projects. And they got paid. I mean, they were working writers getting paid and getting movies made. So, and he kind of took us all under his wing for a while, and it was really nice to have that person, shepherding your career. And then Sandstorm ended, and I went over to Clifford Werber Productions, who had just done Cinderella Story, mm-hmm. Which was a $120 million grossing teen movie. And I love teen movies. And so I started there and was there for another few years. And I still work with Clifford. He's a great guy. And then during the writer's strike, that ended. Mm-hmm. We had things in, that I had sold during the writer's strike. And it was still going and still going and still going. It was going at United Artists, which was – at the time, not to get too far into it, at the time it was like right after Tom Cruise did the jumping on the couch thing, right. Everyone was like, he's never going to work again. And so he's like, I'm going to get into producing and really give my all into producing. And so he loved the project that I had sold to UA, and things were going, and we were meeting with directors, and we had a rewriter on, and all this great stuff. And then all of a sudden Tropic Thunder came out. And everybody was like, oh, wait, we still love Tom Cruise. Let's find another project for him. And then, everything got put on the back burner that was not Mission Impossible. And right. We got put into turnaround and blah, blah, blah. And that's Hollywood, folks. But the break-in story was honestly just like everyone else's. Interned, was an assistant, worked my way up to their director of development at Sandstorm, and then went over to Clifford's as their director of development. Got some things going, and then decided, half writer strike, because there was kind of a hiring freeze. For like a year. I went on a lot of interviews. I did a short stint at Eclectic Pictures. Gotcha. For a lovely summer, for a long summer, and while I was doing that and working, 2 other jobs, and trying to get my own stuff, projects I had already been attached to or that I was finding as a producer. As I was getting that going, I started No BullScript and started consulting, and it took off. And so instead of looking for more exec jobs, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be my own boss for a little while and see what I can do and see what I can make of it.
Good for you. So you basically you made your bones as a development executive, basically.
Yeah.
So, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because I love to hear perspectives of development executives, someone who's been in the trenches, seeing these scripts come in. I'm sure you've read a couple scripts in your day.
One or two, yeah.
And you've heard a couple pitches in your day. So,
yes.
So
about 3,600
36
at current count.
Well,
3,600 or so.
So
yeah.
Is that in dog years or just normal counting?
That is, it makes me feel like I'm living in dog years, but yes, those are actual individual pitches.
So let me ask you, what is the worst pitch you ever took as a development executive? Because there has to be one that stands out.
There is. I mean, the worst pitches are not the ones given by the professional writers who come in for regular pitch meetings. I've had pitches that aren't so great, but the ones that you talk about.
Like the ones that you would be on a podcast and someone would ask you what's the worst, and the one that you would say, that's the one we're talking about.
The one you might put in your book and
of what not to do. Of what not to do. Yes.
They come from the pitch fests and the out of the box kind of pitching things and and events like that. The best one, the best one I used to tell. I was still at Clifford's. I don't remember what event it was, but it was here in Los Angeles, and it was about a year or two after Garden State had come out.
Yeah,
And so I had this guy, and he sat down and he's like, I have kind of an indie dramedy, kind of like Garden State, about this guy who, he's high and mighty, high and powerful, but he goes back to his hometown, which is being like his beachfront, property, which is being taken over by evil developers or something. And, he really hasn't connected with his home in a decade. Or with his family, and he's taking a stroll down the beach to just kind of, get back into the feel of his hometown, and a huge wave comes up and washes ashore, and it washes this great big seal up onto the shore that knocks him over, and the seal rapes him.
For everyone not seeing this on the video podcast version of this, Danny's face is dead straight. It's a complete deadpan delivery, which was brilliant. It was just a brilliant delivery. Oh, how he did it. It was just like, and the seal rapes him. It just stood there, stone faced. It was wow.
I practiced that one.
Wow.
In my former life, I was Jonah Hill.
I got you. I can't believe that's a real thing. Seriously?
Yeah, that was a good one. I mean, I've had a couple of incest ones. Which was,
and these people are these screenwriters are completely straight.
Totally serious. It was in Portland at an event I go to every year. It's a wonderful event. So nothing against the event. This was just this guy. Now, keep in mind, my company at the time at Clifford's, we did Cinderella Story. Yeah. We did Sydney White. We were doing teen coming of age, sweet comedies. And this was right after Brokeback Mountain came out, the year after. And the guy, even he wasn't even sitting pitching to me. He stopped me in the hallway because he couldn't get a session. And he was like, I think this is really for you. I couldn't get a session. I couldn't sign up, but I really want to tell you about it. I was like, sure, tell me about it. He's like, it's a coming-of-age love story between a dad and a daughter. And I gave him 3 outs. I went, like a father, a stepfather, and a stepdaughter. And he was like, no. And I was like 2 older people who didn't know until they were in their 40s and 60s that they were related, and they didn't know. He was like, no. And I was like 2 people who didn't know that they were related and then came together. He was like, no, like a father and his 16-year-old daughter.
Oh.
And I went, you're just straight pitching me
an incest.
I was like, he made Cinderella Story. He was like, I really think the best part was like, I've posted parts of it online and it's gotten a great reaction.
From where incestus.org?
Yeah. And I was like, I think that might be a pass.
It's not a soft pass, it's a hard pass.
I'm gonna think about it, but for now I'm gonna pass. Thank you, though. No, I'm good without the handshake.
I love that you gave them outs, and you were like, and actually your stories were more interesting. I was like, okay, those are like more interesting concepts than just straight up incest.
Yeah, I've had a few of those. I mean, I've had butthead police, where people come in with gimmicks. I used to talk about, don't bring any gimmicks to your.
Oh, like a stripper will show up, or they'll bring props. Show up,
costumes and props, and I had a guy with literally a foam butt on his head, and I mean it. To be fair, at least it tied into the concept. I mean, it wasn't like a random prop.
Is this like Super Buttman or something? Was it?
It was Butthead Police.
Oh,
it was an animated show, so you give it a little bit of leeway, but you realize that for 5 minutes you're literally pitching to an asshole. Wow. I mean, like there's one staring at you on his head as he's pitching, and all you can do is stare at his butthole.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
Why haven't you written a book?
I had a guy fall asleep in a pitch, which was amazing.
No.
And yeah, that was a really good one. Now, in his defense, it was.
Does he have a condition, or is it?
No, the condition was it was like 4:30. It was one of the last sessions. It was 8 hours of pitching. Everybody was exhausted, but if your own pitch puts you to sleep, like just think about what it's doing to us. And if I didn't have my friend assisting me that day and sitting next to me, I mean, he nodded off for like 4 seconds, but you could tell he was like telling the stories like it's a road trip about, 2 girls and they, and they got to go save their, what? And in those 4 seconds, I look over to my friend like,
is he sleeping?
Sleeping?
I was actually that reminds me. I was actually doing a consult once, and I was at a Starbucks, and I had this screenwriter in front of me. We were talking, and he literally, God bless him, he just had a rough night because he had kids and everything. And while we were talking, he would just completely go out while I'm talking. And you know that feeling when you're so exhausted that you're trying to keep your eyes open, but you can't. Yeah. That's what I was for 30 minutes. I felt so. I'm like, dude, do you just want to go home? It's like, if I could, man, I can't sleep. I haven't slept all night.
That's don't have kids, writers. Don't have kids.
So that's the worst of the bunch. Which are amazing, by the way. I have not laughed so hard in this show ever. So I appreciate that. For people watching the video version of this, you will see me lose my crap. It is hilarious. I can't believe some of those stories. Now, what is the best pitch you ever heard? One that you said, "Wow, this girl just knocked it out of the park."
I had a couple of I had a pitching team that really had their stuff down. I will be honest, I don't remember the story, but I remembered them, and I didn't really like the story. I just liked how they pitched. They felt very sure of themselves. They had it down so they weren't talking over each other. They knew what beats to press and who was going to say them and in what order. Mm-hmm. So, they felt rehearsed. They didn't feel amateurish.
Mm-hmm. They were tight.
They were tight. Yeah, it was a tight pitch. It wasn't 5 minutes of rambling because you don't need 5 minutes to pitch your story. You need 3 tops. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they just had it down. And I mean, unfortunately, you don't remember the great ones. You really don't. I mean, you remember great pitch meetings and great people that you meet in pitch meetings. Right. But you don't remember every story that's good, or that's great. You just remember the really bad ones.
You remember the incest. You remember the butt.
You remember the ones that leave an impression. Yeah. You remember the ones that you call your mom about and be like, guess what happened today?
Or you call your mom and go, I don't know why I'm doing this and why am I in this business? What's going on? I need to reevaluate. I'm making poor life choices.
Look, last week was 2 weeks ago was my 16-year anniversary in this town and in this business,
Okay.
and I still call her every other day and say the same goddamn thing.
Just like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't understand it.
What did I do? You should have made me go to business school.
Exactly. Why did you support my dreams? How could you? Now, what are
Why didn't you become a lawyer like all our other Jewish friends? What were you doing?
Now, can you give some tips on how to do a good pitch? Like, what are some of the keys that you need to have a good pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been teaching. Pitching is how I made the jump from executive to consultant. Really, as I was speaking at a lot of these conferences across the country, as an executive, still taking all the pitches at the Pitch Fest, and I just keep seeing those same mistakes made time after time after time. And so I wanted to teach that class, which was called the No BS Guide to Pitching, which eventually kind of led to No BullScript.
Great name. Great name.
I can't take full credit for it. I can only take half credit for it. My first web developer actually came up with it when she asked, what do you want it to be about? I was like, I want it to really be my personality. And I teach a class called the No BS Guide to Pitching and the No BS Guide to Characters. And she was like, how about No BullScript? And I went, oh, well, that's it.
Trademark.
But I started teaching that pitching class, and over time it has changed 100%. But for me, what I teach in pitching is the 5 C's and an H, especially when you have your short pitch and you only have 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes to do your pitch. It's all about concentrating on the 5 C's. The first one being context. The first one is concept. What is your idea? The second one is context, which is to me, it's the template movies. It's in the vein of this and that. It's setting up the tone and the genre. It's setting up the context of why you're the person to write it. What is your connection to the story or character? What is your connection or inspiration? That's going to be somewhat anecdotal maybe, but something personal that's going to connect us to you so that we know why you're the writer that was supposed to write this story. And as well as anything about you that we need to know, that's going to make you stand out. If you've won prestigious contests, if you've been published or produced before, if you've been optioned before, things that are going to make you stand out against the pack. So the context to your project and the context to you. Next is character, who we are going to follow. Why, and I always have my clients and writers say this, is why this character, why now? If you can't answer those 2 questions, you probably haven't figured out a strong enough character base to get your plot moving or to make us invest in that character's story. What do they have to achieve? What do they have to overcome? Who's against them? What is their goal? But also, what is their deeper, emotional need and want? And maybe a line of backstory, so we have some context to them. What their baseline is, so we know once that inciting incident happens, where their arc is going to take them. So the basics, half a dozen basics about your main character. I was a judge at Austin Film Festival. I taught their pitch prep class for their competition for a few years and was a judge for their pitch and comp for a few years. And you only get 90 seconds, and it's a tight 90 seconds. But every single pitch, if writers spent 20 more seconds on character, their pitch would be 50% better, because that is what's going to hook somebody. So that's character, concept, context, character, conflict. What is the especially external conflict that's going to drive the story? We probably got a little bit of the internal conflict in the character section. And then the 5th C is confidence, and just going in there knowing that they want to hear from you. You have something to say, and you are confident, your story backwards and forwards. You don't have to read off cue cards for 3 minutes. This is not your first time. And if it is your first time, you are faking it till you make it so we don't know it's your first time.
Yep.
Just go in there and own the table, own the room so that, you're not cocky, because we don't like cocky, but we do like confident in your story. Be collaborative. If someone has a note or someone makes a suggestion, don't be like, no, that's not how it goes. I wrote this. Be open, but be confident in yourself and your ability. And the H, which I tack on there, is hook, because we really have to know, once we know your concept, what is the hook that's making your concept different and taking it, from a new angle, new, direction, new thing that we haven't heard before. And if you can nail the 5 C's and the H in a 2, 3, 5, 10-minute pitch, you will at least have the basis to bring somebody into that world and let them know, what your story is about. And either it's going to interest them or it's not.
Excellent advice, sir. Excellent advice. And I'm assuming you go in much deeper detail on all of those in your lectures and courses and stuff.
Yes, I do. I do. There's tons. Yeah, webinars on it. There's one on my site. It does go much more in depth, as well as logline. I forgot, in the context is where your logline would go as well.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that.
Now, what is the biggest mistake you see first-time screenwriters make?
I get this question a lot, and honestly, the biggest mistake is rushing the process, submitting before they're ready, submitting before their scripts are ready, not doing their research, and just the deadly combination of impatience, desperation, and ego. And
horrible mix.
If you get those trifecta, you are effed before you ever start.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen, because this business takes 4 things. It takes luck. It takes timing. It takes
your soul. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
It takes your soul. No.
It does take your soul. It takes talent, it takes timing, it takes luck, and it takes. There was one other I always say: talent, timing, luck, and
persistence.
Well, that too, and the right idea.
Yeah.
And the right idea, and if the right writer doesn't have the right idea at the right time and have the right luck, it doesn't happen. Even if you have 2 or 3 out of those 4, it's usually the 4th that becomes the X factor. There's so many projects I've worked on or developed over the years that were just like 2 years before its time. And if we had just waited another year, everybody wanted that thing, or there were writers who had the greatest idea I've ever heard, and it was the right time, but they weren't the right writer for that project, and it's just when those 4 things, the right idea, the right writer, the right time, and the right luck all come together, that's when success happens. But too many writers are trying to force it, and their impatience and desperation will not only cost them sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, which, as a consultant, I'm super weary of because, let's face it, it's not a secret some people don't like consultants, and there are some really shitty consultants out there who should not be charging for working with people, and they ruin it for everybody else. And the writers who are so desperate to get their first script out and made are the ones that are going to fall victim to that. And we hate seeing that happen. And so, in executives, they can smell desperation a mile away.
I was about to say.
Bacon, you it's the one thing. I know a writer who's a good writer, prolific writer, hasn't quite broken through yet, but he got a reputation as being a little too desperate. And people don't want to work with desperate writers. They want to work with people that feel like they're already professional writers. They just, don't have the jobs yet to prove it, but they feel like they are professional writers.
Desperate.
So, that really is
nobody wants to, it's like a girl doesn't want to date a guy who's like so desperate or vice versa. It's the same in this business. And I remember being on both sides of that equation, me being the desperate one, and then me being the one that smells the desperation on people. And it's such a turnoff. You can have the best idea ever, and it's such a turnoff.
To be fair, I think I'm more desperate now than I was 15 years ago.
I smelled it, sir. I smelled it on you, sir. I did.
Yeah, you're just desperate for different things. 15 years in, than you were when when you're in your 20s. But you learn how to keep it under. You don't let the desperation bubble up in a conversation. You learn to stamp it down.
You hide it well, sir. You hide it well. Now, another big thing that screenwriters have to deal with, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but notes and how to deal with notes, because that's such an issue, especially for, amateur writers or new writers. I've seen it. I've been there. I've done it myself early on in my career, where you get a note from a producer or a director or an actor, and you just get completely defensive over your baby. And it's like, no, I am the one. You are not. How dare you? Professionals don't do that. Professionals understand that there is a much bigger, it's show business.
Yes. I always say, this is not, they don't call it an art colony. They call it show business. However, I will say that I think professional writers get even more angry about notes.
Depends on depending on how big they are and how much experience they have. Yeah.
But the thing is that a professional writer knows it's not about the note, it's about the note behind the note. And they know they know the code. They figured out the code that execs use to give you the note they're trying to give you without saying you wrote a bad character. There's something else they're actually saying. And professional writers have figured out how to decode that and how to address their note while still getting across what they want to get across. Or, new writers are so scared of losing that deal that they're scared of asking the question like, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Or, would you do you think this might be a good solve? They're just they just solve everything. They just try to, if an exec says, the character's not that likable, a new writer will go back to page 2 when they're introduced and say, Bill, 35, likable. That's not how you address that note.
That's great. That's great.
But a writer, that's been doing this a while is going to go back and look at, okay, well, why isn't that character coming off as likable? Is the goal that they have, not relatable? Is are the stakes not high enough for us to be engaged? Is the dialogue not quippy enough to show off their personality and make us care? Like, what is the reason for that disconnect? There's a note behind that note that you have to find, and that's the real difference, and that just comes with experience and time and the notes process. It's part of why I think new writers should get professional notes before they start submitting to producers, because it lets you in on that process and gives you someone to discuss those notes with so that you understand the note and can address the note and get options for the note before you're thrown into the lion's den and you're like, he doesn't like my characters. What do I do? Do I make a new character? And you freak out over a note that is probably easy to address if you know how to address it. So, but you have to be collaborative. You have to be open to notes, even if it's the dumbest effing note you've ever heard in your life, and you will get that note. Your response in the room is, yeah, you know what? That's interesting. Let me think about that. And then you immediately do not think about it because it is the dumbest note you've ever gotten. But you don't say that. You play the game a little bit and stay vague, and and that's how you win. But
it's politics. It's a game, and that's what screenwriters and even filmmakers, they don't understand. When you're working in the Hollywood system, there is so much subtext in meetings. There's so much subtext in conversations. There's so many politics going on behind the scenes, and the higher you get up on that ladder, the harder it is. Like, I can't even imagine what it was like for someone like Zack Snyder dealing with a franchise like Justice League and Superman, and Batman, like what you had to deal with at that level when you've got a bunch of scared executives who all think they're going to lose their jobs because this whole thing is coming crashing down, and they got to bring in Joss Whedon to do something for it.
And by the way, every executive thinks they're about to lose their job
at all times. At all times, and half of them will. But on the flip side of that, I will say, and I always stand up for execs, because whenever I'm on a panel with writers or, they're always hating on executives. Who are these people who just want to slap their names on my creation and feel like they're part of the writing process? And, I call bullshit on that. And I do, because the executive who's working with you on your rewrites, who you've pitched this to, who is pitching your idea to their boss, they are your biggest cheerleader in that room. They are putting their name and reputation on the line for you and your idea. So if they're making a suggestion, it's not 95% of the time. Yeah, there's 5% of douches who just want to take credit for stuff, but 95% of the time it's because they know what their company or their boss is going to respond to or not respond to in a pitch or in a script, and they want to help you make that good impression, because your good impression is their good impression, and your success is their success. And so they have no reason to give you crappy notes on purpose, unless you're a horrible person and they're trying to get rid of you. But, which there is that. There is that.
I mean, there is that. There's a tiny bit of that. But they are your cheerleader in the room. They are not there to destroy you or your project or turn it into something else. They are, by and large, very creative people. And I will point out a sad, but not sad, but interesting fact, that there are more executives or former executives that have sold their scripts in the last 5 years than contest winners.
Interesting.
And so more execs like me, we came out to write. We have a background in screenwriting. We do write. And we're not there to screw people over. We're there to get stuff done and be part of the creative process and kind of guide you through that company's creative process or development process. But, a lot of writers, and the higher up they are, the more they feel this way. They feel that too many execs are their enemy, and they're really truly not, almost all of the time.
That's very true. Do you also find, and I think this is something extremely important for screenwriters, especially young screenwriters coming into the business, to understand that in Hollywood is run by fear and avoidance. Yeah. I mean, right? I know it's simple. You and I both know that from being here, but I'm
scared shitless right now.
I live in constant state of fear all of my life. No, but seriously though, like this, that's why there's so many no's, because there's so much fear of, like, I'm going to lose my job. I can't put my balls out there. I can't kind of take the risk. And that's why the films that come out of the Hollywood system are what they are. And occasionally you'll get some really interesting stuff, but that's not their business. Their business is to put out product that sells to the masses, and that's the way the game is played. The days of the experimental studio movie, they're there, but they're rare. They're rare, few and far between. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a different business than it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's a completely different business. The stakes are higher. The budgets are higher. The audiences are pickier. They have to make such different decisions than they used to. When there was a DVD market, you didn't have to get it completely right because you were still going to make another 60 million, on DVDs.
Right.
And, we made a lot of programmers at my first job at Sandstorm, and they made a lot of money. We did the Sniper movies with Tom Berenger.
Oh, that franchise has made so much money.
So much money. We did Sniper 2, 3, and 4, and
but it's kept going. It's kept going though.
They kept going. We did not. They kept going. But we did 2, 3, and 4. We did them for about $5.5 million, plus with the rebate that we got for shooting in Thailand or Budapest. It's like $4.5 million. And they each grossed like $50 million. On DVD and package sets and stuff like that. And so those days are gone. And the days of developing, it used to be when I started in development, it was like the 50% rule. If you could get a good idea 50% there, we'll take it the other 50%. Now it's like you need it to be 90% done with a package before we're even going to read it and think about making it. And somebody at Netflix already has to want it. It's
with an LOI.
Yes. I mean, it is a completely different business now than it was 10 years ago. The upside is there's more ways to break in and more places in more platforms to get your stuff made and a wider array of stuff being made. Mm-hmm. Outside of the studio system, the downside is that the studio system all want exactly the same movie by exactly the same person, for exactly the same budget, and it is hard to crack into that system much more so than it even was. And I think because of Hollywood's attempt at rebranding itself and diversifying itself and finding new voices and new talent and new things, execs are even more careful, 100 times more careful than they were 3 years ago. They are looking for very specific things now, whereas before it was like, look, just have a great idea and have a great script. And now it's not just that, and so writers have to do their due diligence and not follow the trends because it never pays to follow the trends, but you have to know what the trends are so that you can try to get ahead of them. I said years ago that very soon there's going to be a major rom-com, a major LGBT rom-com that hits, and that's going to be a new big thing, and then Love, Simon came out, and there's a bunch of things, in development right now that fits that bill, especially for Netflix. Mm-hmm. So it's trying to find that next thing while knowing what people want to read. I've actually, I know a lot of screenwriters, I know a lot of professional screenwriters, and I've read some of their scripts, some of their specs. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes I'll get done reading it. I'm like, why isn't this made? Yeah.
Like, this is amazing. Like I see Meryl Streep in this. I see, it's just so good because I've read bad scripts. I've written bad scripts. So I've read, but I've also read bad scripts as well. And when you read something of quality, it's just obviously they know the craft, they know the thing. Mm-hmm. They're, they have credits of movies that you and I would, if I said out loud, you would go, oh, that guy. And they even have a star attached. Mm-hmm. And it's still, nope. It's insane.
I read just as much great stuff from writers who aren't getting produced as I read crappy stuff from writers who are getting produced. And, that just happens. It just happens. It's a numbers game. It's a referrals game. It's a budget game. There's a million reasons why good scripts don't get made and some bad projects, get sold or get made. it's not usually the writer's fault, every once in a while, but that's just how it is. I've had plenty of projects over the years that I was like, this is my no-brainer. If this doesn't get made, I will eat my shoe. And shoe.
Shoe with a little A1 steak sauce on it. Little sriracha,
a little bit of ketchup. Yeah, it goes down easy. And then there's other stuff. It's like, this is the worst piece of crap I've ever read. How is this getting? How is this going in to every major studio with major producers attached? It's not good. That's just something you have to accept, and you can only do so much and write the best script for you, for your voice, that's going to help you get ahead, and stop worrying about, can this sell, and just, worry about, can this get me to that next place in my career that I'm looking to go to?
Right.
Can this fill, can this achieve for me my next goal, instead of like, can this win me the Oscar? Like, no, it's your first script. It's not winning you the Oscar. Just like, try to get read by,
anyone,
3 people first. Yeah. Right. And then worry about your Oscar like 10 years from now.
That's so ridiculous. I mean, people's egos gets, this town is so full of ego. It's not even funny. And I've dealt with it. I still have one, but I try to keep it in check and I keep it relative. But there's some people who I've literally had filmmakers in my post suite tell me straight faced, I'll see you at the Oscars next year. Like straight faced, like not Sundance, not Tribeca, no, Oscar. Like that's where this is going. And I'm like, wow.
I will say the tagline for my company is "Hate me today, love me in your acceptance speech."
I saw that. That's great.
So it could happen. I'm waiting.
Could we also win the lottery? Sure. Yeah,
sure.
Sure. It could happen. It could happen. No problem. Now I want to talk about something that writers and filmmakers as well, they all think that this is the magic thing that you need: an agent. The agent is your face just kind of, your eyes rolled back. For people not seeing this, his eyes rolled back. I think he lost consciousness for a second as I said that. But the agent, you already had a little mini stroke. Because agents and managers, all I need is I need Ari from Entourage. That's all I need. I need Ari from Entourage. There is an actual Ari.
Ari has been fired in the Me Too movement, so you're screwed. Actually,
exactly. I know both the real Ari and the actor Jeremy Pivens. But we need a barracuda. We need a shark like that to be our agent, and that they're going to go out there and they're going to hustle and get my scripts read and get me the millions I deserve. Please, let's just talk about that. Let's let that out in the air. Please tell me your perspective.
It is my least. It's the least favorite question I get from writers, right. Because it's the number one question I get from writers is, how do I get an agent? And for 90% of those writers, the answer is you don't. The agent will get you if you need an agent, but most writers don't. Unless you have at least three viable, sellable, pitchable, commercial projects, an agent's not going to pick you up yet. Go for a manager if you really feel you need someone. But for those writers who only have one idea, or, they just have that – they don't want to be screenwriters as a profession or as a long-term career. They just have one great idea, one script they want to write, one piece of legacy they want to leave because they think this is a great story. Don't waste your time with managers and agents and stuff like that. They have no use for you.
Right.
Just try to make your script as great as possible and then try to find a producer who will read it. And you have a very singular focus. And that's almost a lot easier than a writer who wants to do this as a long-term career. But if you want to do it as a long-term career, there are plenty of ways to find representation, but know when you're ready. And most writers, again, are submitting far too soon. If you don't have, a dozen ideas that you're developing, if you don't have at least 2, if not 3 finished scripts, if you don't have, if you've never pitched before, if you've never networked before, if you've never done any of the homework and the research before, you're not ready for a manager yet. Mm-hmm. Keep working on your craft. Managers aren't going anywhere. I mean, it's not like if you don't get them in 2019, you'll never get one. They're always gonna be there. You have to wait until you're ready, because you really do only get one shot most of the time. But between contests and events and pitching and social media and consultants like myself who have good contacts with those reps, and just friends and referrals or whatever, there's a million ways to find a manager, and they can be super helpful in your career. But know when the right time is. And as far as agents go, I don't want to badmouth agents.
But you're going to badmouth agents. It's okay.
But you have to know what you're offering them.
Right.
And they don't, unlike a manager who's kind of there to guide your career and they're in it for the long haul and they're there to help you develop, an agent is there to close that deal and get you the best terms possible. And a great agent is there to make a great writer into a superstar. That's what great agents do. If you're barely on your first project or you're on your second script and you're just trying to get read, you are like 2 to 5 years away from needing an agent. And if you do need an agent, your manager will help you get that agent because they have those relationships. I always say look for a manager before you look for an agent. Unless you have something really specific or you have something in development with like a client of that agent. If you got to an actor, which by the way is way better than going to an agent. Go if you're looking for an actor or you think you know the actor that's right for your project, don't go to their agent unless you have an offer, because the first words out of their mouth is, "Hey, that's great. What's the offer?" And so if you don't have financing, don't bother with the agent yet. Go to their production company where they have assistants and executives who are in charge of finding and reading scripts for their talent to produce. And there is no better silver bullet in this industry than having a great actor attached to produce your project. It opens every door. So if you're thinking that, Charlize Theron might be right for your project, don't go to her agent unless you have a $14 million offer to make her. Go to her Delilah, whatever it is, films, banner, call and get an assistant on the phone and tell them that you think this would be great for her to produce, and get in that way. And then if she likes it and wants the role, great. If she doesn't, she'll get another actress of great caliber to read it. That's way better than ever calling an agent. But that's on the packaging side. If you're trying to get an agent yourself, go for a manager first. Have a portfolio of work that is commercial and sellable and ready to go. And know exactly who you are as a writer and who you want to be, which is something I work on with my clients and my mentees constantly, because today, unlike 10 years ago where you had to decide, like, were you a TV writer or were you a film writer? And today everybody wants both. Like, you have to be both or want to do both. But you also have to know your voice. And you also have to know what kind of writer you are and how you're going to be sold for the next 2 or 3 years. And I know everyone's like, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to get into a box.
You'd be lucky to get into a box.
Yeah. Friggin' pray for that box. Jump into that box with both feet like my cat does, and just love that box, because that box is making you money. That box is getting you scripts. That box is giving you a career that you're going to be able to jump out of that box and make an even bigger career 2 years from now. So get real nice and cozy in that box for 2 years and stop effing complaining that you're being put into a box. You're being put into the studio system. That's what you're being put into.
It's insane when I hear that. I'm like, I don't want to be boxed. I'm like, you would be so blessed and lucky if you could be boxed in. I know. I used to. One of my good friends was Wes Craven's assistant years ago, and he would tell me stories of how upset Wes was about. Man, I'm stuck in this horror box. I can't do anything. And do you remember that there was a movie called Music of the Heart?
Yeah,
with Meryl Streep and Gloria Estefan. That was a Wes Craven directed film.
Absolutely was.
And you know why he got that? Because they wanted Scream 2. That's the only reason he got it.
That makes sense.
He wanted Scream 2. He's like, you want Scream 2? Give me, it was called 500 Violins originally, and then it changed to Music of the Heart. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but look at that. Wes Craven had one of the greatest horror directing careers in the history of cinema. Honestly, his name is up there. But he was unhappy about being in the box.
Look, I get it. I mean, you don't want to be in that box forever.
Yeah.
You know?
So don't be too good is what you're saying. Don't be too good in that box. Like if you're really good, then you're stuck there. But just be good enough to get in a box and then you can chop out.
Right. But that's the conversation to have with your rep, saying, look, I love doing horror, and that first script that got you a rep and got you 40 meetings around town was a horror script. So that's the next 2 projects you're going to do are horror projects. But if you tell your rep up front, like, hey, I love doing the genre stuff, but I also want to do comedy, and I also want to do an action movie, then their job is to find that project, to develop with you or for you to develop that is going to make that transition for you so that you're going from horror to horror comedy to comedy, or horror action to action comedy to whatever. And so that they have a plan for your career. And I always tell, when writers are trying to find their voice, find their box, but not get too stuck, I always tell my writers to look at the subgenres that you're writing to try and find a through line that is your voice, because it's not usually in that major genre, that first genre. But if you come to me and you say, look, I have an action comedy, a horror comedy, and a romantic comedy, I was like, okay, well, you've got a through line there that tells me what your voice is. You're just bringing that voice to different genres, but now we know what your voice, what you want to do, what that connective tissue is, so that we can sell you as a type of writer. Even though you're doing different genres, we know what your voice is bringing to that genre. And that's how you break out of that box, is by using those subgenres and secondary genres to bring out who you are as a writer, instead of just, the genre of the premise you happen to come up with.
That's awesome advice. Actually, it's really great advice. And I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What advice would you give a screenwriter trying to break into the business today?
There's the funny answer.
Run.
Just run. Yeah.
We both went to the same place.
Run, Forrest. The real answer, there's 2 real answers I'll give. And one is a mistake that I made for many years in my career, was I thought I was going to be an Emmy-winning writer. And so for the first few years, and before I was even in the business, I didn't pay attention to the other stuff. I didn't think I had to know about financing or distribution, right, or casting. Well, I loved casting, but there were other things, the business side of it, that I didn't think I needed to know, because I was just going to be writing talent, and that's it. I didn't know about the development process until I was interning and started doing coverage, and then as an assistant, doing scripts. I didn't know about networking. Like, I just didn't know other stuff because I was so focused on my little corner of the world. And if you are a writer today, you have to multi-hyphenate yourself. If you're a filmmaker today, you have to multi-hyphenate yourself. If you're an actor today, you have to multi-hyphenate yourself. So you need to treat it like a business and do the work and do the reading and be knowledgeable on way more than just your little corner of the office. that's one thing, is have a bigger scope in terms of the information you're taking in, so you really understand the business you're getting into from all sides. The second thing is write while you can, because it's not going to get easier as you get older. I wish looking back when I was 24 and I had time.
Oh God, time, remember those days?
But I didn't write, because there was probably some party I was invited to, and you're like, I had so much energy at 24. What the hell did I waste that for? If you are young enough, try to break in from the inside. Come to Los Angeles, get a job in the industry, break in from the inside. It will cut years out of your journey. If you can't do that, then at least get out of your box, wherever that box is. If you are, in the middle of Oklahoma and you are writing alone, find a group, find a conference, find people, go online, social media, use it to your advantage. Know when this business is a marathon and when it's a sprint. Know when to ask for help. Find a consultant or a mentor or a person that can help you. There are no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts.
None.
And I wish I learned that earlier. I wish I learned that nobody owes you jack S.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a little while to learn that. I mean, look, I'm from Long Island. I mean, I've been working since I'm 14. I worked my ass off in college and every day since I'm 14, 15 years old. But now they call it white privilege. Back then we were just assholes. You feel like somebody owes you a little something just for getting through college, just for doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. You're like, where's my agent and my $1 million career? Where's my Emmy at 30? Like, I saw 30-year-old Emmy winners. Where's my Emmy? And you realize nobody owes you anything, and
Amen.
you need to keep working your ass off, no matter how hard you worked on that first script. Keep working on the second and the third and the fourth.
Absolutely. Now, can you tell me what book had the biggest impact in your life or career?
Like what screenwriting book or what?
Any book. Book.
That's a good one.
Screenwriting book works as well.
I mean, I don't know that I loved. There were Okay, this is probably the opposite version of what the answer you're looking for is. But there were screenwriting books that I read as an executive, and starting out, that I disagreed with so vehemently that I had to write my own and start teaching classes, because I was like, if people are reading this shit, they're going to have the wrong impression of what executives really want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to write my own book, and do my own thing to tell them how it really is, and tell them the other side of it. And so I won't name what books, but there are books on pitching and 60-second pitching and things like that you might be able to figure out that I just really disagreed with, at the time, 10 plus years ago, that inspired me to write my own articles and my own books and do the consulting and bring something else that wasn't out there to writers. In terms of like great literature, 1984 was always a huge
great book
favorite of mine. It's the one I remember in 9th or 10th grade reading and picturing as a movie, and me saying in my head, I really want to make the movie version of this one day. And so I that was one that always stuck with me, and now we're living it.
We laugh because we're dying inside.
Yes, we laugh because crying makes us sad.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
I think, like I said, nobody owes you anything, and you're gonna make mistakes. I'm working on a new book and book proposal now about those mistakes. Who knows if it'll ever get done? But
Spoken like a true writer.
yeah, exactly. You know, I hate to say it, but like, passion isn't enough. But if you don't have it, you'll never make it.
Right.
That's
great.
Like, if you don't absolutely love this industry and what it does and what you can get to do in it, then get out, because it's awful otherwise. Like, it has its moments, don't get me wrong, it's fun and stuff, but it's hard. I mean, if I knew then what I knew now or stuff, would I make different? I'd make a lot of different decisions. But if you don't absolutely love it, if you don't feel like you are trained for nothing else, I have no other viable workplace skills. I can't do math. I'm not great at history, but there's very little else I can do.
You've doubled down.
Maybe advertising.
You've doubled down. You've doubled down.
Like, you're in it until it's over, but that, like, passion is great, but it's not enough. But if you don't have the passion and you don't love it, get out, because it will eat you alive and make you a worse person instead of making you a better person.
Whenever I speak, I always say this to people in the room. I'm like, everybody here knows an angry filmmaker or a bitter filmmaker. Everybody here knows an angry screenwriter or a bitter screenwriter. And if you don't know one, you are the angry, bitter screenwriter. You are the angry, bitter filmmaker.
And we all go, but if you haven't been bitter for a day, you probably haven't been in this business long enough.
Amen. No, there's no truth.
I mean, look, I get dinged. I used to get dinged all the time for being cynical and, a little bit more of a pessimist, and I try to balance it out, but you are what you are, but you gotta try to look on the bright side of things. And the hard part about Hollywood is that the carrot is always right.
Oh, yes, that carrot.
And sometimes it's right here, and sometimes it's right here, and you're just constantly following that carrot, because every once in a while it just gets so close, and and that just drives you crazy. But you keep going, because as long as there's a carrot in front of you, you just got to keep following it. But that is the dangerous part of this business, is you always feel like there's a carrot there.
Isn't that carrot so... Well, anyway, 3 of your favorite...
And someone to help you reach that carrot. Oh, and then you can't do it alone.
Right.
That networking and friends in this business is important. And I made a horrible mistake, and I talk about this pretty openly in my classes. Like, when I was starting out, I had a lot of friends from school that came out here. We were all, TV film students. But they were my friends, and then here were my business people. Mm-hmm. Here were my business acquaintances or my colleagues, or the word that I like to use, friendences.
That's a great word.
Yeah, that's mine. I'm coining that.
Trademark, acquaintances.
But it was quite a few years until I really started to realize that you have to make those acquaintances and colleagues friends.
Yes.
Because if you don't, you're always going to be on the outside a little bit, and we all feel like we're still on the. I feel like that every single day of my life, and most people do. I know people who are very much on the inside who still feel like they're on the outside. But make friends and treat people like they could be friends and not just colleagues that can get you something.
Yes.
Or someone you can do something for, or some sort of favor system. Because even though Hollywood does work on a favor system a lot of the time, it doesn't feel like a favor when it's with your friends.
Right.
And so, networking is great, and everybody talks about networking. And I was okay at networking when I was younger. I hate it now, but I was okay at it when I was younger. But what I wasn't good at was turning those networking moments into friendships.
Fair enough. That's great advice.
Everyone's trying to do that, especially as they're coming up, because the people you come up with are who you're going to be in this business with for 20, 30 years.
Now, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
I knew that you asked people this, and I tried to – I came up with so many things of what you could ask me. Writer influences that I love, and underrated scripts and top 3 of all time. I've been trying to figure it out. And, of course, they do change. Everybody's favorite movies change.
Sure.
The ones I always tend to go back to are A Few Good Men,
Great script.
American Beauty, and a comedy that I think is so underrated, but every time I say it, I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie of all time, but the original A Death at a Funeral is such written by Dean Craig. It's a British one, not the Chris Rock one, the original one with Alan Tudyk and a wonderful cast of characters. Is such an insanely hilarious, underrated comedy. That when I read it as a script, I had to call the agent and just be like, can I meet with him? This is the funniest thing I've ever read. I don't think I ever actually did get that meeting, but I love the movie. My cousin Vinny is up there too.
Oh, love Cousin Vinny.
In terms of comedy, I can watch Heat. All day long. The Nice Guys and sort of like newer movies that I think should be classics. Shane Black's The Nice Guys is right up there.
All good titles, sir. All good titles.
Yeah,
now,
I'll put all those in my hopper.
Now, where can people find you, and can you list off the books you've written and what you offer and all that kind of stuff, and where they can find you?
Yeah, people can find me on my website, which is nobullscript.net. If you do .com, it'll take you there too. But nobullscript.net.
I was going to say, is there another No BullScript that we're not aware of?
No. Funny enough, it was taken, not 10 years ago. This year, 2019, this May is my 10-year anniversary.
Congrats.
Running this company. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. When I started the company, my hair was here. And so at the time when I got it, somebody, another consultant friend of mine, who I didn't know at the time, owned nobullscript.com, and there was nothing there, but they owned it. Now I own it. nobullscript.net. You can find me on Twitter at Danny Manus. I put tons of screenwriting stuff and other comedy news, ranting, things.
And then you offer a mentorship, and you also offer consulting.
Yes, absolutely. On No BullScript, you can find all my consulting services and packages from. I really work soup to nuts, from concept and brainstorming through all the different drafts to polishing and rewriting, query letters, pitch help. It really is pre-managing. I like to call it pre-managing because I help my writers figure out what they should write, help them develop it and write it. And if it's great and it's ready and it gets a recommend, I try to get it out there, to my contacts who I think will respond. And a year ago, I started this mentor service. I only take 15 writers at a time, or somewhere around there. And it's a 5-month mentor service. It's much more in-depth. We do calls every 2 weeks. So you're getting lots of notes calls. We're going through your ideas. We're developing them. And instead of just, paying for one set of notes and then, maybe you come back for a second set, which is great. This allows us to go through the process of however many drafts it takes to get it really polished and set. So by the end of the 5 months, you've got at least one, if not 2 scripts that are really ready to go. And it includes career, coaching and pitch coaching, query letters. It's very all inclusive. I'm about to start my 3rd cycle of that now for the spring. I still have a handful of slots open, and I'm always looking for more because I actually really enjoy being able to mentor writers. It's not for first-time writers. I should say that. This is not for first-time writers writing their first script. This is for writers who have written a couple things and really want to take their career and their scripts and their next projects to the next level. But you can reach out. It's on my website or through Twitter, or you could email me always at daniel@nobullscript.net. You can email me, and I'm happy to help. And my book, No BS for Screenwriters, Advice from the Executive Perspective. It used to be, it's still on the Writer Store website, but now that the Writer Store doesn't exist anymore.
Is it gone?
It's gone. It's gone.
I know it's gone in Burbank, but is it gone on the website too?
No, the website's still there.
Okay.
Website's still there. They do still, sell some webinars and books and things, and you can still get my book on there. You can also email me for an e-version. They have a hard copy version. I do have an e-version that you can always get from me. Yeah, and I'm always looking for new groups and conferences out there. So if you're listening, and I know there are a ton of great people listening to this, this podcast, if you've got a conference or a film festival or a panel and you want someone to, bring the fun.
Bring the spice.
I'll be whatever spice girl you need for your panel.
Remember that whole desperation thing we were talking about? It's starting to come off.
Can you smell that now?
I can smell it. It's a good quaff. I could smell it in the air. Danny, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you for dropping some great knowledge bombs on the tribe today, man.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
I want to thank Danny so much for coming by and dropping some major knowledge bombs on the tribe today. It is always nice to have the executive's perspective when you're pitching to executives. So if you want to get links to anything we talked about in this episode, including contact information for Danny, his book, and so on, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/BPS042. And guys, if you haven't, please check out my new book, Shooting for the Mob, which is a allegory of what not to do when chasing your screenwriting or filmmaking dream. It is an insane down the rabbit hole story of how I almost made a $20 million movie for the mob, and I was taken on a roller coaster ride through Hollywood. It is based on a true story, and definitely anybody in this business, anybody who wants to get into this business, should definitely read it. Just head over to shootingforthemob.com. That's shooting with 2 O's, themob.com. And that's it for another episode, guys. As always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenplay Podcast at bulletproofscreenplay.com. That's BULLETPROOFSCREENPLAY.com.